r/AskReddit by Reddit and chill. Which propaganda effort was so successful that people still believe in it today? That low-fat products are healthy. In the 80s there was a huge push toward low-fat products due to some hackneyed propaganda science, which resulted in a deluge of low-fat high-sugar food products to be produced en masse. This trend is now singled out as one of the biggest factors that triggered the obesity diabetic epidemic across the US and elsewhere. When I had gestational diabetes, the endocrinology nurse kept pushing the low-fat dairy foods. It made me want to scream. The worst option for someone with diabetes. Not her fault. It's what the government decides to push, but I'm sure many of the other women there wouldn't have taken her advice and then struggled to keep their blood sugar levels down. The USDA food pyramid. Every time this comes up I feel I'm obligated to mention that they're revising it again in 2020, this time with a corn syrup lobbyist, Kaylee Karch, involved directly in the process itself. To be clear, it's not as if she had a job as a lobbyist a decade ago and this is what she's doing now. Ex-White House counsel Donald McDonald actually had to draft a letter waiving the ethics requirements in order for her to be allowed to step out of her job as a lobbyist for the Corn Refiners Association and directly into a position drafting federal dietary rules. The food pyramid, my pyramid, and my plate were always more representative of who lobbied the hardest than any actual science. Dairy, for example, is not an essential part of any diet unless you're a newborn. This represents a new low though. Just read today that donations made to the Breast Cancer Association with the pink ribbon go largely to fund advertising, merchandise, and higher-ups at the association. They regularly deny funding to those with breast cancer and hardly donate to cure efforts, from what I read. Total propaganda. Yeah, Pink Ribbon is a pretty shitty charity from what I've read. I don't really support any big charities anymore. I'll much rather donate to something local when they are raising money for a specific purpose so you can see where the money goes. Anything to do with diamonds or the amount of money that needs to be spent on an engagement ring. Honestly, the whole wedding industry. That having the light on in the car is illegal, stop it, mom. It may not be illegal, but it will mess with the driver's night vision. Napoleon was of average height. Yet we still talk about short men having a Napoleon complex. British intelligence took some film of Hitler walking and manipulated it to make it look like he was doing an insane jig. Brits also put out a rumor that their pilots ate a lot of carrots. The carrots were supposed to be the reason the RAF shot down so many German fighters at night. The real thing was radar. The Protocols of the Elders of Zion was written by a Tsarist officer to justify rioting against the Jews. Book is still being cited by anti-Semites. So you are gonna tell me that there's a video of Hitler doing an insane jig, but you are not gonna give me a link? That you should spend 1 or 2 months' salary on a wedding ring. Propagated by the diamond industry. The fact that carrots mail good eyesight. This was a lie propagated by MI6, or its parent agencies, during World War II. To hide the fact that the Brits had very good and operational radar. They told the public that the pilots could see in the dark well because their eyes were made stronger by the carrots they ate. That's some grade A propaganda. Not only does it hide the truth from those who'd seek to destroy them, but the only false consequence from it is that people eat more vegetables. Edit. It has been firmly established that rationing during the war was also a major factor in this strategy. Detoxes. All of them. Taking a dump and having a leak are your body's mechanisms for removing unwanted materials. And they work very well left on their own. It's expensive diarrhea. If you want it that badly, just eat a habanero. The thing is, the really successful ones we have yet to identify as propaganda. That the McDonald's hot coffee lawsuit was utterly frivolous. I wonder why media conglomerates and corporate interest might have wanted people to believe in basically their most effective tool for seeking justice against much larger entities. She initially requested that McDonald's pay her medical bills only. They refused. I believe the original verdict was 1 day of coffee sales nationwide. Then they appealed and got it reduced to only 1 day coffee sales from the state, maybe NM. Probably could have looked it up and given accurate info. But that wouldn't be any fun. That we need to fixate on our fear of terrorism to the point of sacrificing all our privacy. Those who would give up essential liberty to purchase a little temporary safety deserve neither liberty nor safety. Benjamin Franklin. The food pyramid. Who needs 8-11 servings of carbs? If you base your diet on that pyramid, you'll look like that pyramid. The diamonds are rare. So you're saying that Minecraft is just a bunch of bullshit? The satanic panic with Dungeons and Dragons. There are still super religious parents who believe it will summon the devil if your kid plays. Unless he's going to play a healer. I'm not really interested. Breakfast is the most important meal of the day. Your first meal of the day, regardless of time, is your breakfast meal. Lemmings. Lemmings are not suicidal creatures. This was propaganda created by Disney for a faux documentary made in the 50s. Then the natives taught everyone to grow corn and they lived happily ever after the end. The story of the first Thanksgiving was the exception to the rule. Squanto had a crazy life, check it out. He was a slave in Britain. Which is how he learned English. When he met those Mayflower people who were starving, he took pity on them. It's an interesting story. But it is in stark contrast to the rest of the history between native people and colonial power/settlers. The diamonds are a girl's best friend. Not going to lie. I do like diamonds, but wow, I can't wait for that industry's balloon to pop. The shiniest sham of them all. Blueberries being a superfood. Anything being called a superfood. That the Battle of Kadesh had a clear winner. The new kingdom of Egypt and the Hittite Empire were engaged in a war over what is now Syria. Their forces met at Kadesh and fought to a stalemate, resulting in a white peace. Upon returning to Egypt, Pharaoh Ramesses II and his generals bragged about their victory. Monuments, statues and tombs were built to honor Egypt's great victory. This being over 3,000 years before the internet. Everyone who wasn't at the battle just kind of believed him. The Hittite narrative was that Ramesses was overrun and retreated back to Egypt. Again. Nobody on their side questioned it. You wouldn't be able to get away with it in 2019. But people in both states believe their side had won an epic battle and routed the enemy when really it was a draw. You wouldn't be able to get away with it in 2019. Oh. You would. And they do. Nixon-Reagan era anti-drug propaganda. Especially against weed and psychedelic drugs. I remember my psych teacher in 10th grade who was a teenager during the 70s, and since the man kept pushing how weed was just as bad, or worse, than harder and more dangerous drugs, a lot of the classmates she grew up with ended up overdosing. BC their rationale was, I do plenty of weed and nothing bad ever happens. So doing a lot of this drug won't do anything either. BC the government clearly lies. The $1 million McDonald's coffee lawsuit. People think this woman sued and won all because she spilt her own coffee. In reality, McDonald's was serving their coffee at over 100 degrees and she had to get surgery because her genitals and thighs fused together. That vaccines cause autism. Autism seems to happen because the first symptoms of it show themselves around the same time most children are getting their first vaccinations. It's so dumb because the paper originally discussing it has been debunked for over 20 years and people still refuse to fact check it. Breakfast being the most important meal of the day. I believe that was a marketing gimmick. Absinthe being poisonous, psychoactive, and or hallucinogenic. Hep was in a bar in Ireland that served authentic absinthe. Asked the bartender if it would make us trip. And he said, well, yeah. If you drink enough of it. Fast forward, my buddy is decorating the curb with the contents of his stomach and I paid for his trip home. It wasn't the norm in America for women to shave their legs until the 1940s-50s. Razor companies like Gillette capitalized on rising hemlines and the shortage of nylon for stockings during World War II and began to make ads that implied leg hair was unsightly and that women should use their new safe razors to rid themselves of it. Kinda crazy how that's still expected to this day. Kind of genius on their part too. Similar to Revlon and nail polish. Lots of beauty standards are simply marketing propaganda. That propaganda is something that happened in the past and not something that is far more pervasive now than it ever was. Reefer madness. If it wasn't so successful, pot would be legal in every state. That org moss are bad and we should never eat anything that has them in it. That undercover police officers have to admit they are a cop if asked. Otherwise they are guilty of entrapment. Not true and never has been true. Police are 100% allowed to lie to criminals before they are arrested, if it helps them catch bad guys. But police love this myth because it gives a false sense of security to dumb crims and thus makes their job easier. Duh. Scaring kids into not doing drugs could work in theory. But that creates a demographic that wanted to do drugs a lot more thanks to it. The dangers of nuclear power. Oil companies and energy industries lobbied and spread lies because nuclear power is environmentally friendly and has debatably the highest power density of any power source, and the fuel can be made in larger scale relatively cheaply compared to mining it. Thus it would wreak havoc on the energy industry and lower profits for all other forms of electricity production to the point of putting them out of business. Edit. Holy duck. You kind stranger took my silver virginity. Thank you much. Gonna respond to top level because there's multiple comments talking about nuclear waste. The whole belief that waste is a huge issue is literally part of the propaganda against nuclear power. It's annoying because, like most good propaganda, there's a grain of truth to it. It just doesn't mean what you've been told it means. Yes, it's true that at this time there is no permanent solution to waste disposal that has been implemented. However, that is not because such a solution doesn't exist. It does. We just haven't implemented it because we don't need to. Reactors generate extremely little waste. So little, in fact, that the cheapest and easiest solution at this time is to simply store it on site. Reactor structures are already hardened for this, and are ideally suited for temporary storage. Temporary in this context literally means decades. Again, very little waste is generated. Basically, you're taking up a little bit of space in facilities that are already equipped to handle it, run by people who know what they're doing. The long-term solution most talked about is deep storage in a single facility, usually buried in a mountain or something. But at this time, it is actively a bad idea to do something like this. You will be spending a huge amount of money building a facility to solve a problem that isn't a problem. On top of that, you're then incurring needless risk by transporting the waste from where it is right now to this new facility. Just the risk of transporting it is far greater than the risk in just leaving it alone for another few decades. Yes, eventually there will be enough waste that a different solution should be implemented. And when that time comes, we can pick any one of the half dozen great solutions that are already known, and do one of them. Until then, we are doing exactly what we should be doing. Edit. A couple words. Anti-vaxxism. The one published paper on this was retracted and its author ejected from the General Medical Council. Little comes close in the harm caused to the world by this abject refusal of science. The fact that the paper was debunked and his license revoked actually adds to their enthusiasm. Not really a propaganda effort, but in South Korea lots of people think that leaving a fan on overnight while you sleep can kill you. The government just wanted people to stop wasting energy. Didn't this have to do with suicides? I don't know the exact story anymore, but I hope someone can further elaborate. Bad breath prevention products. Before Listerine was a mouthwash, it was marketed as a house cleaner. Then the people selling it said people who don't use it have halitosis and that if they don't use Listerine, people will hate them. It's still effective. Who cares what the company originally did? The mouthwash is an entirely different formula. That water in pools, water parks changes color to pinpoint someone who's peeing into the water thanks to a special urine sensitive dye. War on drugs. Many people my parents' age believe that weed is an evil drug that leads to addiction and worse drugs. Getting caught with it by my dad would have meant an ass whooping. MSG being harmful for you. It was literal nonsense spread to smear the Chinese in the 1950s. It's political propaganda that even endures to this day, where people complain MSG gives them headaches, which is absolutely impossible. Korean fan death. I've known about this for a long time, but for some reason when I read your comment I thought of K-pop fans dying instead. Spinach makes you stronger. Ike. There was a miscalculation of the amount of iron contained in spinach. Male circumcision in the US. Ducking Kellogg and his preoccupation with masturbation. White Jesus. The OK symbol being a white pride symbol. Thank 4chan. Ducking like and subscribe.